So thank you very much, James. And so we'll move on to our final speaker for tonight, which is Charlotte Moss. So Charlotte was diagnosed with melanoma back in 2011, and she was told her cancer was not treatable by chemotherapy and radiotherapy. She then decided to take part in a clinical trial on a new experimental cancer treatment called immunotherapy. And as Tim mentioned, perhaps 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't so commonly spoken about as it is now. And so 10 years later and cancer-free, Charlotte's here to tell us a little bit about her experience with cancer and her involvement with the Centre for Cancer Immunology. Thank you very much, Charlotte.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to come along today. Before I tell you a little bit about myself, I wanted to ask everyone, essentially, what is your lucky number? Apparently, the most popular response to this question is 21. I was a bit surprised by that. Or maybe you might be selecting the lucky number 13 as your lucky number. If somebody asked me that question, I would say, rather unusually, 1,200. And the reason for this is that was my patient number on the clinical trial at Southampton. It was also the total number of people who were on that trial. So I was the very last person to be accepted. And so for me, it's become a very exceptionally lucky number. When I was first diagnosed with melanoma back in January 2011, I had a very small nondescript mole on my knee that I wasn't seriously concerned about, but it had changed slightly, so I got it checked out. Had it removed, and unfortunately was confirmed very quickly as being melanoma. When I was told this, I took a deep breath, but because the mole was so small and it didn't seem like massively significant, there was no huge amount of pain or I didn't feel ill, my initial response was actually quite a little bit kind of positive. Like, what do we do now? What next? There must be something else. And actually, it turns out what next was 2 more surgeries. I had a wide local incision, which was to take a larger area of the original site, and a sentinel node biopsy, which is essentially part of the immune system. The surgeon described it at the time as almost like a knight with a little kind of a sword or a spear, just kind of looking after the body or in part of your immune system. But unfortunately, when they took out the sentinel node and they undid the main layer, there was no longer any node, there was only cancer. And it was really at that point that it hit me, that it wasn't just a mole that had started to change and look a bit different, but the cancer had spread, and the results really showed that it had been spreading for quite some time. Another surgery followed. This was called a block dissection, where quite a few nodes at the top of my leg were removed. Thankfully, at that point, no more cancer cells were found. But that did mean that I was very advanced stage 3 cancer. And the odds at this point in time were quite poor, just 20% chance of surviving the next 2 years. I thought at that stage that there would be the more traditional treatments of radiotherapy and chemotherapy, but I was told that given the seriousness of where I was, that these would not be effective. And the only thing at that point in time was to wait and see if the cancer returned. And it's a really odd feeling knowing that there may be cancer cells inside growing, but there's nothing you can do and you just have to wait until it starts to become obvious. However, here is where my lucky number finally came up. I was invited to join a clinical trial that was being run out of Southampton, which at the time wasn't anything I'd heard of before. It was a new type of immunotherapy drug, a new type of treatment. And one of the main reasons I wanted to join the trial was because it was a very clever solution. I just thought it was really great to be able to use your own immune system, give it a bit of an upgrade to recognize the melanoma and deal with it. It just seemed almost a bit obvious in some ways, but it just seemed such a unique way of dealing with it. So I started a 3-year clinical trial. The treatment itself was really straightforward, especially in comparison to the surgeries. The bulk of the treatment would be a trip to hospital every 3 months. On a Friday, I'd have an infusion for 90 minutes. Actually, the worst part was trying to get the cannula in, especially in the winter. I would then take it easy over the weekend, and then I was back at work on Monday morning. And it really was as simple as that. And it really helped me take back control. There was no visible external signs I was going through any treatment. At work, I didn't have to explain what was happening. I didn't have to take large periods of time off work. It was all very normal. Every 3 months, I just happened to take a long weekend, and that was it. So since the trial, I have now been cancer-free for over 10 years, which is incredible, actually. And I'm now really looking forward to continue to work on my hobbies and my drawing. And when I was first diagnosed, I was very focused on the very short-term view. So just trying to get through that day, or just trying to get that week or that month. And now I'm thinking about what I'm going to do for the next 5 to 10 years. What are we going to do when we retire? Kind of the normal conversations that you would have. And since the success of the treatment, I really wanted to give something back. And so speaking to the team at Southampton, they suggested I get involved as a patient representative in the clinical trials unit. There is a group of us who meet on a regular basis, and we are presented with a number of clinical trials, and we just comment and see what it's like as a patient, and we try to kind of put that voice of the customer, voice of the patient across for the clinical trial. And it really does feel like you're making a positive impact. It's really good. It feels that my experience can be useful and be able to give something back and help others in their journey. It's also quite nice to think that someone would have reviewed the clinical trial that I was on. I'm not sure if it had the same structure in place, but someone would have been checking if the forms were clear, that it was easily understood, that the patient on the trial would understand the process, and so on and so forth. And when I signed up for that, somebody would have done it. So it feels quite nice that it's kind of feels like it's going full circle. So being part of the group really does bring home the huge number of people involved. Obviously, we've heard today how many people are involved in kind of doing the research, but there's a huge number of people that sit behind the scenes who get involved in developing and creating new treatments. And although I've kind of mentioned about being lucky, that really had absolutely nothing to do with it. It was the hard work and dedication from everyone here today, and everybody back at Southampton. They're the people that saved my life. The only lucky part was that I was connected to Southampton, and then it is the centre of excellence that it is, and long may that continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. That's a fantastic to hear about your experiences, and yeah, thank you very much for your endorsement of our centre.